Okay, next chapter. Chapter 18 of Genesis. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, Do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah, and said, Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it, and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? And he said, She is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, No, but you did laugh. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord, by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. Okay, this is jumping out at me. So listen to this again, verse 19. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep, here it is, the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. That's the way of our Lord. Righteousness and justice, only magnificent ways, not evil, no hypocrites, no judgment in the sense that human beings often judge others, no comparing, no all the works and deeds of demonic entities and human beings in the flesh, basically. Righteousness and justice. The ways of the Lord are good and only good. And then he goes on to talk about how he has heard outcries against Sodom and Gomorrah, so he's going down to see if it's as bad as what's come to him through, obviously, people's prayers and cryings out for help. So the men turned from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" And the Lord said, "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Abraham answered and said, "Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." Again he spoke to him and said, "Suppose 40 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then he said, "Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." He said, "Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Then he said, "Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again, but this once. Suppose 10 are found there," he answered. "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham. And Abraham returned to his place. A testimony is coming to me that I just want to share, and I only heard this like a couple of weeks ago. David Livingstone, Scottish medical explorer, went out to a part of the world, I think it was in Africa, excuse my ignorance, and as a Christian. And he first came across this opportunity when he was a young lad in a service in church, and someone who was a missionary out there had returned to the church and was telling about all the needs of the people. And he said, who would be willing to go out? And David Livingstone was a really young boy, and he said, "I think the Lord wants me to go." And so the missionary said, "Well, in that case, I advise that you go to medical school and you become a medic, and you go out and see what good you can do." So lo and behold, years and years later, David Livingstone goes out, and he's working in all the giftings of God for the people, not to mention medically supporting people. And there was a tribe nearby who did not believe in Jesus, and they were quite violent, and they were opposing David Livingstone and his ministry out there, and they threatened them and said that on this night we are going to come to you and your people and we will slaughter all of you. So David contacted his church, obviously, for prayer support, saying, "Please, will you pray for our protection?" Anyway, the night came where that tribe of people were meant to go and murder David Livingstone and all of his Christians, and nothing happened that night. There was no attack. 2 years later, David Livingstone had a visitor, and it was the tribesman of all of that clan, if you like, of people. And he said that he was now ready to believe in their God, the Christian God, because it was evident that they were thriving and protected in ways that the tribesman and his people had never encountered or experienced. And he could see over all of this time that they were believing in the one true God. And David Livingstone sat with him and he said, "Do you remember you said that you were going to come and murder us all? What happened? Why didn't you?" And the tribesman, explained that they did, And he said that him and his finest warriors went up and surrounded the camp of David Livingstone to attack, but that they couldn't get in because there were 39 greater warriors standing around the camp. And David asked him to explain what they looked like, and true enough, it was in the form of angelic beings who were massively tall and spiritually oppressing the tribesman and his clan. So they all came to faith in time, and the land started to thrive even more, and so be it. When David Livingstone returned to that church when he was older and was going to tell the congregation about all the marvellous things that had been happening, and no doubt the more challenging ones, he got up and he told them about that night that they were supposed to get attacked, and then what happened when he met the tribesmen 2 years later. And the secretary ran through and she said, do you remember the date of that night? Now, David Livingstone is well known for documenting his experiences, and he said, of course I wrote the date. I have all my journals from my time there. So he took out the journals and he found the date, and the secretary opened up her church journal, which she had to keep as a record for the congregation. And on the same date, she had recorded that there were a congregation in total of 39 people that night, and that they'd all gathered together in prayer to protect David Livingstone and his people on the night that they were supposed to be murdered. And there were 39 angels sent to protect. So I thought that was awesome. So yeah, there's the Lord having heard so many outcries and prayers to protect the people because of the great degree of sin in Sodom and Gomorrah, that he actually went down to inspect it and see. Anyway, all right, I'll keep going.